Hey guys, it's Jake here with Etrailer. Today we have a 2023 Nissan Titan that we're going to be taking a look at, and I'm going to show you how to install the Air Lift LoadLifter 5000 air helper springs. Adding a set of air helper springs to the back end of your Nissan Titan is going to help you to get some rear end support whenever you're hauling heavy loads in the bed of your truck or on the hitch. There's going to be a lot of different options when it comes to rear suspension enhancements for the Nissan Titan. The air helper springs are just going to be the most adjustable to be able to add or subtract the PSI in the bags to really dial it in for the load that you're wanting to haul. You can see the double convoluted design, and how it gets at is going to be a metal band here in the center. That is going to help hold its shape so that the bag acts as a, say like a coil spring. It'll go up and down with the vehicle as the vehicle goes up and down. It helps to protect the airbag so that it does go straight up and down and doesn't fold over on itself. You may have seen other styles of bags like on dump trucks or semi trucks that have a one singular bag design. Those are different because they will actually have a cup that goes up inside of the bag. This design is really helpful so that it has a straight path to travel up and down. These airbags are going to have a PSI range from 5 PSI all the way up to 100 PSI. You will want to keep at least 5 PSI in them because, like I just said, you want to keep the shape of the bag. So when you have 5 PSI in that helps to keep them inflated. The other thing that comes with these bags, or another little stipulation, is if you have no air in the bags and the bag is trying to flex properly, you're going to have some suction. So the bag's going to want to cave in on itself if you're over rough terrain or anything like that. Just keep in mind when you take your vehicle to a shop or you have a lift at home and you want to lift your truck up, if you have a 2-post lift, these bags are not designed to support the rear axle. So if your axle starts to drop, you can potentially rip these bags apart. It bolts to the top of our leaf pack using U-bolts. That'll have this custom-made bracket to fit around the perch here for our leaf springs. And then we're going to have another custom-made bracket that fits both sides of the frame rail. It'll match the contour of the frame. It's actually a really nice design. Probably one of the easiest sets of airbags that I've ever installed. The only thing is that you will have to remove your wheel and tire in order to get in here and tighten these 2 bolts down. Now, something that we did not install today, but I always recommend because it's going to make using your airbags a lot easier, is installing an onboard air compressor. That will tie into your bags. It'll allow you to adjust the air pressure up and down on the fly. So if you're traveling down the road, you think you need a little bit more air in your bags, you can add 2 or 3 PSI, 10 PSI, 15 PSI, whatever you think you need. Or worse, if you think you need to let some out because your ride is way too stiff and you start to get a little bit of sway in the back end, and you can let a little bit of air out. If you don't want to go with an onboard air compressor, I highly recommend picking up a little portable air compressor. We have a few options on our website. They either just plug into a 12-volt outlet or they're battery operated in order to inflate and deflate your bags. Because I can tell you, trying to find a gas station with that has free air at it or that you have to pay for the air and that compressor there actually working to be able to adjust your airbags is very annoying. So pick up an option, whether it's portable or non, that bolts onto your frame. Now, like I said a little bit earlier, as far as the installation goes for these bags, it is not a very difficult installation. Definitely one you could do from your floor in your garage, especially being that you will have to remove your wheels and tires to be able to make a few connections. But with that being said, let's go ahead and show you how we did it. To begin our installation, you're going to want to drop down your spare tire. It's going to give us quite a bit more room to work under here. And then we're going to need to remove our jounce bumpers. You can take a flathead screwdriver or a pry tool in order to pry these out. I just removed the passenger side and I was just able to grab it and pop it right out. Then we'll take a 12mm socket and get that bolt removed. You want to take either a flathead screwdriver or a trim panel tool like this, and you just want to go along the frame rail and pop your factory wiring off the frame rail, because we're going to have to slide some U-bolts over top of the frame. So let's go along, making sure that this wiring harness is loose by popping all those out. Now we can take our top bracket. The driver's side is going to have the even long wings on it. The passenger side is going to have one shorter wing. We're going to take this bolt. It's a 13mm head bolt that comes in your kit. and it's going to go up through the bottom just like this. We're going to place that on our jout spring location, and this I found to be easier if you just put the bolt in a socket and then lift that up into place, and we can tighten it down. Let's loosely install that until we get our other hardware in place. Then you'll want to take your longer U-bolts, run those over top of our frame, and then drop them down through the holes in our bracket. Once you got them both dropped through, you want to take your flange nuts and thread those on. Then you want to lift your bracket up tight up against the frame, and then snug down that 13mm head bolt. For your U-bolts, you want to tighten each of these nuts evenly. The best way to tell that is that you're going to have the same amount of threads sticking out at the bottom. You also want to make sure that your U-bolts are straight up and down. And we're going to torque that hardware to the specifications and the instructions. We need to assemble our airbags so that we can get them up and installed. You want to keep track of where this air fitting location is at. You'll see that we have two mounting locations on the top and bottom, and then we have this air fitting. So I've got the air fitting on your guys' side. You want to mount your bottom plate to where this opening is on the air fitting side. And you want to push it to the spot or location B. There's little etched spots here. You want to push it forward so that the hole that you're using is furthest away from this opening. We'll take this plate, set it on top, set this back on there. Then we're going to take these button head bolts, or the flathead bolts, thread those in place. Then take a 5.5mm Allen head and tighten them down. Using a torque wrench, we'll want to torque these down to the specifications in the instructions. On the top of our bag, we'll want to take our air fitting and get that started by hand. Get it as tight as you can by hand. Then take a 7/16 wrench. Remember the starting location of the wrench, because we're going to do 1.5 turns. And that is all that Air Lift wants you to do in order to tighten that. We'll take our top cap, put that in place. Now these two bolts that we're going to put in, these hex bolts, you just want to leave fairly loose, because we're going to have to slide those up and pivot them into the top bracket. Now before we lift our airbag up into place, this is the two key slots I was talking about. When you lift the airbag up, this can be kind of tight. We're just going to slide it over our components, and we can push down on the bag in order to make it smaller. Slide it over top of our perch here. There we go. Get that air fitting to line up with its hole. Those bolts lined up, and then this slot on the back. Essentially, there's this same spot on the other side. That's what that opening is for. If you tighten those hex bolts a little too much, you may have to back it out a little bit. I just had to do that for ours. But then you should be able to just slide it through the key slots. You just want to make sure that your 4 holes here on the bottom of our bracket for our smaller U-bolts are all exposed. Then take your smaller U-bolts, lift them up, get them lined up with our holes on our plate here. And then follow those up with flange nuts. Now the same thing as before, we'll want to come back and tighten and torque these U-bolts evenly. You'll want to repeat that process on the passenger side. On our passenger side, we do have a little bit more space because we're not fighting with that shock. You do just want to watch this, this line here to be sure that you don't nick it or cut it anyway. With both of our airbags installed, we do still have to tighten those top 2 bolts. So the top of your bag is probably going to be loose, or it should be loose. We're going to have to remove our wheels and tires off our vehicle in order to get a wrench in there to tighten those. But what I'm going to do before I do that is I'm going to go ahead and run my airlines, get those connected into the bags, and then I'll show you where I ran it back here. We're going to be using a T-fitting today so that when they go to air up their airbags, both of them air up at the same time. If you want more of a sway control or a sway into the vehicle control, I recommend running them as separate lines to the back of your vehicle. To route our airlines, we just started back here on our bumper, just to the left of our license plate, drilled about a 1/4-inch hole in our plastic here. Since we're going to be teeing off, we just had 1. You can put 2 here, or you can take out the bolts out of your license plate, replace them with the air fittings. That seems to work out pretty good too. But we just ran it through, zip tied it on any spot that we could, ran it up. Here you can see our T-fitting. We've got our line going into the T, and then one side going to the driver's side, and the other side going to the passenger side. Now for now, we've got our airlines run just over top of our bracket here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to see if it's easier to connect those after we remove the tires. Because right now it's just kind of a guessing game, and we're not going to be able to get enough pressure to make them connect. We've got our vehicle back on the ground. We're going to lift up on the rear end of the vehicle, put some jack stands underneath the axle, and we need to remove our wheel and tire assembly. Now here you'll see our airline sticking through here. What we need to do is we need to try to line it up with our air fitting. So the way that I got this into place is that you just want to put both your fingers on either side of the fitting, guide the airline through. Once you line it up with the hole, you want to push in. If it feels like it's stopped, you want to try to push it in another 1/8 of an inch. That's what gets it through that O-ring in order to seal it. Now we'll take a 9/16 wrench and tighten down our bolts on top of our airbag here. Now we're going to add about 50 psi in order to test out our lines for any leaks. You want to spray some soapy water on the ends of the fittings where your airline goes in order to check for leaks. Now this is very difficult to see in here, but we can look closely and we don't see any bubbles forming where our connection is. After you've tested your system for leaks, again, if you have a T-fitting on the inside, you want to check that, and also you want to spray the fitting at the back of your vehicle to make sure it's not leaking. But once you have no leaks, you can throw your wheels and tires back on, and that's going to do it for the installation.